Hello, and welcome to Interaction Design Module 2 Tutorial 2. So what are we going to be doing today? So we're still working on our P5 sound form storming, and you would have just seen the, hopefully, watched Tutorial 1 where we were able to look at using synthesized sound. So we're going to try something a little different today, and each of these 3 tutorials for this activity is going to be looking at different parts of how P5 works. I mentioned that already in the previous tutorial. This one is going to be looking at how we can open, play, and control a sound file in our browser. So let's actually jump right in and take a look at the code. I have something prepared here. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code, which I've got a window waiting. I'm going to grab this. Well, actually, you know what? If we go inside the Module 2 Tutorial 2 folder, you'll find the P5 audio playback, and inside there you'll see that there's an asset folder, and inside that I actually have a MP3 that I've put in there. There's the index HTML. Oh, actually I shouldn't have done that. We're going to look at it when we pull it open. Oh, jumped the gun a bit, didn't I? That's fine. Let's go back. Let's go back a step. Imagine you didn't see that. So when I pull it in, you're going to see that there's a whole bunch of sketches that are already there. The one that I just kind of popped up and you saw is kind of getting right down towards the very end. And all I'm going to do is we're going to walk through these. A lot of these have very incremental changes. I just wanted to give you guys copies of them so you could kind of see before and after what those changes mean. So I'm going to go up one level, drag that into my window, and then you can see that now we can access all of those. Okay, so now the one thing I did want to change there is you can see that I have it set to sketch 7. Let's change that to sketch. There's really not much else going on here. You can see that it's basically using the exact same Cloudflare links with P5 sound, with p5.dom, p5.min. You can see it's using the same HTML elements with this, the sort of styling elements. So let's jump in and take a look at, wow, look how short that is. Super simple, right? So what we have going on is we have a variable we're calling song, right? So let song. In our setup, you can see we're using CS6 function styles or syntax, and our song, we're now declaring it. So we're defining it. So we declared it here, we're defining it. Song equals load sound, and so that's the function that P5 sound uses to load an audio clip. And you can see that it's using a string that is very specifically connecting the URL, which is our assets folder, right? Now, when this is uploaded, there's a chance we may have to adjust the assets folder. Sometimes what we need to do is that, okay? And we may have to do that because the way that the server accesses files is not always the same as we do with a local machine. I'm doing this locally right now, but that's something to be prepared to have to do. And all you're really telling it there is go and look in the folder, all right? But for now, we're going to run it like this. You can see that I have song.setVolume commented out, but we do have a canvas that is set to be 720 by 200. I'm very curious to see how that holds up in comparison to our CSS that's kind of telling it what to do, but we'll see. Our background, you can see in our setup, we are setting to red, to 25500. That tells you a little bit about that. That background is going to just open up as a red background right off the bat. And other than that, we just have this mouse pressed function, right? There's not even a draw if you look at it. And in our mouse pressed, we have an if statement. So we have if song.isPlaying as a function, right? And this is, you can see in the comment, is playing returns a Boolean. So it's going to be looking for if song is playing is true. That's what that means, right? Song.stop. So it's stopping the song immediately, setting the background, making sure it's red. Else, right? So if song is not playing, song.play. and setting the background to green. All right, and it's basically that simple. That is this first piece of code. I'm just going to need to pull that up for a second to get to my go live, which is down in the corner. You guys can't see it exactly. So here we go. And is there sound playing? Well, let me turn that down a bit. And as I click, I can turn it on and turn off. When I do click, you can see that it's basically just doing that thing. It's changing the background color, and it's starting the song again from the beginning. Okay, so that's the very first step. Just getting this working is going to be your first step. We're not doing this at this point in the browser. We're going to be dealing with some of the sort of server-side issues in the third tutorial. Today we're really just going to be looking at playing with sound itself. So let's jump into our index. Let's change this to Sketch 1. We're going to head over to Sketch 1 and let's take a look. So what's changed? So what has changed is we are now adding a preload. So in our preload function, you can see that we've basically just moved that exact same line that was in our setup is now in our preload. And the reason for that is that you would find that often when you're loading any kind of web document, that it's going to start loading the things that it gets available immediately. And sometimes with sound, if you want someone to access sound in some way, you want it to be available often right from the start. Otherwise, it's going to take some time to load. So what this is going to do is it's going to say preload this asset before you load the rest of the canvas. So in our setup, you can see we just have the create canvas. You can see that we've got this background again set to red. In the comment out, you can see that we've got a song.loop. Song is ready to play during setup because it was loaded during preload. You can comment that out and play with it if you want. We again just have our mouse pressed, and now the only difference here is instead of it stopping, we're pausing it, right? So this will pause and resume from the position that it's in if everything is working correctly. I'm just going to pull that up, and let's see how that works. So we still have our red. I'm going to pause, and you can hear that now the song is continuing a little bit. Pause it, and it continues from where it left off, right? That's it. It's a cool song. Anyway, so let's jump back to our code. Actually, you know what? Let's reduce that for a second. Okay, so now in our code here, let's jump back to our index. Let's load up Sketch 2. We've added this new variable called let slider volume. The preload is still the same. Let me make sure, yeah, the preload is still the same. In the setup, you see that we have this slider volume equals create slider, which is this sort of very first one. If you don't put the slider volume at the very beginning, if you put it after the background or after the canvas, it actually won't load in the window properly. So pay attention to this sort of like order of things in the setup. And then in the draw, we now have a draw. And in the draw, you can see that we're setting the volume of this song variable. And it's using the slider volume, a value that comes out of it as a function, right, or as a method. And so this is going to be something that is, of course, drawn and looped, which means it's a dynamic interactive element. The mouse pressed is identical as to the previous one. So if we come over here and we look, we can actually, click, and it'll start the song, stops the song. But now what's different is you can see there's this little slider object at the top, and if I click it, I can drag that up and down. I can change the volume here instead of changing the volume on my desktop, okay? But also notice that when I grab that, like it's not hovering, when I grab it, it either stops or starts, right? I want you to pay attention to that because that is a very specific thing that's happening because of this sort of mouse pressed and the way that we're accessing the volume through the slider. Okay, I'm going to pause that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at sketch 3 next. So let's go down to 3. Let's save that. Oh, you already see there's some things happening there. So let's jump over to sketch 3 and we'll take a closer look at that. And you're going to notice that really specifically we now have a second slider, which we have the slider volume, which is the same as the previous one. We now have slider rate, right? Remember, these are just the names of variables, just made those up. In the slider rate, you can see you're just creating another slider, and it has some different incremental values here, right? So sliders, if you look up create slider, you'll see that these have to do with its how much. So this is going to go from 0 to 2 as a slider. From 0 to 2, right? It's going to start at number 1, and this is the increments of like 0.1. So out of a 2, you'd have like 20 then, 20 increments, right? For the volume, you can see it's for 0 to 1. It's going to start at 0.5, and it's going to go up at 0.01 increments. So even though it's smaller, it's actually quite a bit larger in how many increments there are in the volume. So it's less staggered and feeling more smooth. And other than that, you can see that in the draw, it's just accessing both of them. And let's hear how that sounds. So if I click on it and I go to adjust any of the sliders, it's no longer affecting the whether I click in the window or not. There we go. Okay, so next we'll take a look at, let's take a look at our sketch 4. Cool. You can see I actually have the link turned off, and I did that on purpose. I'm gonna open that link, and immediately you can see that the styling has changed on these sliders, right? And that's really all I wanted to show you in this one, was just how you can add a class to your slider right here, allowing you to go into your CSS and style it, right? Which is pretty cool, because you can see now it's not just that sort of generic slider, it's now this sort of cool one with the purple and the black. Okay, so let's turn that off. Let's take a look at our sketch 5. And there's some changes you can already see in the window. There's some cool stuff going on. Whoops. I don't want to give that one away too much. Drag this down. So you can see, though, I've kept a lot of stuff the same. We have our let song, our let slider volume, let slider rate. So we're still at some way using sliders. Somehow we're still using sliders, right? But they certainly don't look the same. Same song, and the create canvas. This should just be like display width, display height, and dealing with all of it in the CSS. But anyway, there it is. We are using the same callback method with our loaded song.play. In our draw, you can see we've set it to red. In our draw, though, everything is now in our draw. We have our slider volume is mapped now, and this is map is one of my favorite functions to use in P5, because what we're doing is we're taking a set of variables and applying them onto another one. And so this is going to be, and you can see that the way I was moving my mouse in the browser window, that kind of gives away a little bit of what's going on there. I'm going to just pull that code over a tiny bit so we can kind of see the whole sketch all at once. So the very first parameter here is going to be the source, right? So this is mouse X. So it's basically looking to mouse X for values. It's going to be mapping 0 and the width of the canvas to 0 and 1, okay? So that's all it knows that it's doing. And it's not doing it anywhere right now, but it's taking the value that comes out of mouse X, and it's connecting the 0 to the 0 and the width to 1. The then slider volume, we're constraining that. I'm going to suggest you actually look up constrain function just to see how that works. But it's constraining whatever this, oh, I know what it is. It's taking the slider volume, it's constraining it between a 0 and a 2. Song.amp slider volume p5.js. Whoops. Constraint. Let's start there. Constrain. Okay. So left wall equals 25, right wall equals 75. So it's constraining the mouse. So even though the mouse can go further, and you can see that in the ball or the ellipse it's here, the one that's constrained is stopping at those two spots, right? So it's creating those two as declaring variables, defining variables, and then in the constrain, it's creating, so mouse X is the source, left wall, right wall, and so that's the constraint right there. So that explains that one well enough. Because we are dealing with P5 sound, let's look up amp. Okay, so the syntax for amp. So amp is volume, ramp time, and T from now. That's interesting. So the ramp time, so amplitude between 0 and 1, ramp time number, create a fade that lasts until ramp time. T from now number, schedule this event to happen in T from now seconds. So it could be a timed event that you add to amp. So anything else that's within here? It's not really giving us anything more than that. So it's basically a volume function. Okay, and I'm going to pull that there. So whoops. Then within our draw, we still have, so we have, you can see we have a stroke 0, which is going to be black. We have a fill, which is a sort of a gray, right? So we have this 51, which is a weird number to use, but that's going to be not as dark as black, but certainly not very light, right? If this was 255, it would be white. If it was black, it was 0, it would be black. 100 means it's going to be transparent. So you can see that within those ellipses that there's a black circle that is around around the ellipse, right? That's showing the ellipse, and that the circles themselves have sort of like a transparentish color, which will become more obvious when when they intersect, right? And then it's an ellipse, and the ellipse is connected to mouse X, so the one position is mouse X. Other than that, it's at 100, 48, 48, and the other one is going to be, you can see, at mouse Y. So that's those two ellipses. One is going to be run from the horizontal, one running from the vertical, but there are two ellipses. They both have the same stroke 0. They both have the same fill. There's a lot you can do to play here, and in fact, that's kind of where we go with the last step. And we have the same mouse click function. Oh, but it is using the mouse clicked. And at this stage, I've gone to the mouse clicked from the mouse pressed because there are no separate sliders. So recall that with the sliders showing, you can't have a mouse clicked because when you click on the slider, it will start and stop the song. So it was mouse pressed. So in this case, I've gone back to mouse clicked. Let's see how this works. It's funny how the ellipses are really collapsed. Let me just reset that. I don't remember them being quite so long that way. I wonder if it's because I've stretched the canvas out. Yeah, look, they're actually tied to the canvas window, so they're less stretched when I do that. That's kind of a weird one, because it's the 48 by 48. They should actually be round. There's no good reason why they're not. Let me try saving that and see. No, isn't that strange? So they're squashing. And I wonder if that's because of the way that the CSS is running it. You know what I'm going to try to do? I'm actually going to just here run display width and display height and see if that changes things. No, that just basically made them tiny. And I don't hear the sound anymore. Isn't that weird? Oh. Oh no, we just have like way more room. So let's then take that 48 and let's make that more like 200. How's that? So that's still funny how it's squishing it. Wouldn't have thought so. But wow, it's super smooth. I don't have an immediate explanation for why that's not round. Other than when I pull the canvas out, you can see that it starts to squish the other way. And you can see I can still click the canvas and it turns off and on. Cool. It's nightmarish. I love it. Great. Okay. If anybody does figure out... Wow, that's a crazy sound. If anybody does see a good reason why that is... and I don't think it's the constraint. But I find that very interesting that it's even the slider rate, like these are just the sliders. This is the way it looks, and it really, really should be straight up 200 by 200. So it has to do with the way that CSS is maybe squishing things a little bit. Interesting. That's worth playing with as well. All right. So for our last one, let's take a look at Sketch 6. We're going to go to the index HTML. And we're going to log in with 6, and you can see that it's exactly the kind of change that I was talking about there. So, in fact, nothing else has really changed. The rest of this is the same, and what's changed is I'm playing with the fill and the stroke weight. But I would actually say there's a lot of places. Like this is an easy place to go to start playing with how it's going to look. The functioning of it also has a lot of room to play with the way that the constraint works, the way that the map works. Like these are really great places to look at the sort of mechanics of it as to how that pitch and volume are going to change. But let's look at what this looks like as a visual now. You can see how the overlap and you know what? I'm just thinking let's look in the background and also see there's something I'm curious about. With the background, did I make any adjustments? Yes. So the one other thing I want to point out, because this might not be obvious at first. So this background is set to, it may be set to red, but it is set to 10%, right? And let me make sure that, in fact, both of the other ones are also, let me save those. And the reason why is that 10% means that every loop that it's running, it's only adding another sort of 10% to it. And it's a really easy way to have this sort of like cool kind of blurring effect as it transitions, right? Like if that was set to 100, you'd see that this would actually look really different, right? Like you don't get that blur effect the same way. And maybe that's something you want to play with more and see, you know. I'm also using some pretty jarring colors here on purpose. This is actually a place for you to consider form storming, right? Like the functionality of it, the aesthetics of it, how it looks. Those are the places that you definitely want to start looking. Let me turn that off for a second. I'm going to pull up our sketch. So that's looking through the code. Lots of stuff there to play with. So for your week 5 tutorial 2, for the form storming, you're going to want to do the same kind of experimentation you're doing with the first one. Play with the mechanical way the code works, play with the aesthetic way the code looks, follow your curiosity, even if it breaks the code. You can always download it again. Save a version though, because I would say, of course, I'm not trying to be dismissive of your time invested. So every time you do save a version, save it. Save it as something else. You can see that that's what I do there, where I save it as sketch 2, sketch 3, sketch 4. Get in that habit so that you have like a whole selection of different things that you're working with, because it's always good to be able to, in fact, you could see with that mouse press and mouse click how important it was for me to be able to go back, grab something from a previous sketch that worked a little differently, test it, and move forward, right? Always save your versions of those aha moments. Those are going to be critical in your form storming. And with that, start form storming.